This is a Peyote trip report by Lunarvelli, posted to erowid.org on December 18, 2017. I arrived at the ceremony site just after sunset. The building was a low adobe structure set on a dry plain. A thin line of orange light clung to the horizon, and the air smelled of sage and earth. Inside, a circle of woven blankets covered the floor. In the center stood a low wooden altar, draped with a red blanket, a small bowl of sand, and a few candles that flickered in the gentle breeze that slid through the cracks in the walls. The shaman, an older man with silver hair and a calm face, moved slowly around the circle, arranging incense and checking the placement of the cactus buttons that would be used later. He spoke in a low, steady voice, reminding us that the plant is a teacher and that we must treat it with respect. He asked each of us to set an intention, something we wanted to learn or understand during the night. I sat down on a blanket, crossed my legs, and placed my hands on my knees. I closed my eyes for a moment and breathed in the scent of burning sage. My intention was simple. I wanted to see what lay at the core of my own being, to meet the part of me that I had hidden for years. I did not try to control the outcome. I told myself that I would accept whatever came, even if it was uncomfortable. I felt a quiet certainty that this night would change me in a way that words could not capture. When the shaman called us to begin, he handed each participant a small, button-shaped piece of peyote. The buttons were dry, brown, and bitter to the taste. He instructed us to place the button on our tongue, let it dissolve, and then swallow the saliva. He reminded us to keep our backs straight, to keep the space around the altar clear, and to remain still while the medicine took hold. The room was quiet except for the soft rustle of blankets and the occasional crackle of a candle. I placed the button on my tongue. The bitterness hit my palate immediately, sharp and metallic. I swallowed the saliva, feeling the plant dissolve slowly. The shaman began a low chant, a rhythm that seemed to pulse in time with my heartbeat. He moved around the circle, offering a small pinch of tobacco to each person, encouraging us to breathe deeply and focus on the breath. The tobacco smoke rose in thin spirals, filling the room with a faint, sweet odor. The first minutes passed with a sense of waiting. My body felt heavy, as if a blanket of drowsiness was settling over me. I tried to sit still, but a small urge to shift my weight kept me adjusting my position. I stood briefly to use the bathroom, the cold night air hitting my skin, and returned to my place with a feeling that something inside me was beginning to stir. Soon after, a gentle warmth spread from the center of my chest outward. It was not a heat that burned, but a soft glow that seemed to expand with each breath. My vision softened at the edges, and the candlelight appeared to flicker more slowly, as if time itself were moving in a different rhythm. The shaman's chant grew louder, and the sound of a low drum began to echo from somewhere in the back of the room. The drumbeat was steady, like a heartbeat, and it seemed to sync with the pulse I felt in my own chest. As the medicine settled deeper, a strange drowsiness came and went. I found it difficult to stay comfortable. My legs would shift, my back would ache, and I would rise to stretch or to use the restroom again. Each time I returned, the room felt a little more alive, the air a little thicker with intention. The shaman moved around, his eyes calm, his voice a steady guide. He reminded us that the space around the altar must remain clear, that we should keep our legs crossed during the prayer rounds, and that we must keep our backs straight. He said that these physical actions were a way to show respect for the medicine and for the spirit that we were inviting. When the shaman announced the first sound round, a hush fell over the circle. He asked each of us to create a sound, a vibration that would rise from the throat and fill the room. He said the sound could be a simple ommm, a sigh, a hum, or any noise that felt true. I felt a mild resistance at first, a small embarrassment that I might sound foolish. The medicine had already softened my self-judgment, and I let go of the resistance. I inhaled deeply and let out a long, resonant aaaahhh that seemed to stretch across the space. The sound rose, lingered, and then fell back into the room like a wave. One by one, each person added their tone. The room filled with a chorus of low hums, high whistles, and everything in between. The sounds blended together, becoming something that felt alive, like a single organism breathing. I could feel each voice as a distinct color, a texture that added to the whole. The shaman smiled, his eyes closed, as if he could hear the shape of the sound itself. We sat in that state for what felt like an eternity. though the candle flames only flickered for a few minutes. The feeling of connection grew stronger with each breath. I sensed that the sound was not just noise, but a living thing that was growing, breathing, and evolving as we held it. When the sound round ended, a profound stillness settled over the room. It was a stillness that felt heavy, as if the air itself had been compressed. The shaman whispered a short prayer, and the candles seemed to burn brighter for a moment before dimming again. I felt a shift in my own body. The warmth in my chest had deepened, and a faint tingling began at the base of my spine. It was as if a small current of electricity had been turned on, moving upward with each inhale. At that moment, I opened my eyes and looked at the walls. The adobe surface seemed to ripple, like water in a shallow pool. The shadows cast by the candles moved in slow, fluid patterns, forming shapes that reminded me of leaves, of feathers, of small spirals. My mind tried to name the patterns, but the names slipped away. Instead, I simply watched the movement, allowing my eyes to follow the flow without trying to interpret it. The shaman began the next round of prayers. He passed a small pipe, filled with a mixture of tobacco and kinnikinnick around the circle. When the pipe reached me, I lifted it to my lips and inhaled the smoke. The smoke was warm, sweet, and it filled my lungs with a gentle pressure. The shaman spoke, his voice low and steady, inviting each of us to speak to the fire, to the altar, to the spirit that we had invited. He said, "Now is the time to say what is in your heart." The grandfather listens. I felt a surge of fear. The words that rose in my throat were shaky, raw, and filled with tears that I had not yet allowed myself to feel. I began. "Only I would be so naive as to think that I could run from you, Peyote. Grandfather." My voice cracked, and tears streamed down my face. The shaman nodded, his eyes soft, encouraging me to continue. I spoke of my hidden fears, of the parts of myself that I had tried to ignore for years. Each word felt heavy, as if I were lifting a stone and setting it down on the altar. Around me, others spoke in similar tones. Some whispered, some shouted, some simply sang. The room filled with a chorus of confession, of gratitude, of longing. The shaman listened without interruption, his presence a steady anchor. I could feel the collective energy rise like a tide that was about to turn. My own breath became deeper, my heart beat louder, and a sense of being held by something larger than myself settled over me. After the prayer round, the shaman offered a small piece of fresh peyote. He said that the next dose would help us move deeper into the experience. I took the button, placed it on my tongue, and felt the bitterness again. This time, the taste seemed less sharp, as if my mouth had become accustomed to it. I swallowed, and the warmth in my chest grew brighter, spreading up my throat and into my throat. I felt a pressure at the back of my head, as if a door were opening. The drumbeat returned, louder now, reverberating through the floorboards. The sound of the drum seemed to match the rhythm of my own pulse. I closed my eyes and let the beat guide me. The room around me faded, and I was left with the drum, the fire, and the feeling of being inside a vast, dark tunnel. The tunnel had no walls, no ceiling, no floor. It was a void that stretched infinitely forward. In the darkness, I could see faint points of light like distant stars moving slowly across the interior. They pulsed in time with the drum, and each pulse seemed to push a little more light into the void. I tried to focus on the light. As I did, patterns began to appear. They were fractal in nature, repeating shapes that seemed to grow and shrink, to expand and contract. The shapes were not static. They breathed, they lived. I felt as if I were looking at the inside of a living organism, at the very fabric of something that was both simple and complex. The sensation was both beautiful and unsettling. My mind wanted to label it, to put it into words, but the words slipped away. All that remained was a feeling of awe, a deep, reverent feeling that something vast was present. My body began to feel light, as if the weight of the blankets and the floor were no longer attached to me. I could feel a gentle lift, as if I were rising. The drumbeat continued, steady and unchanging, a constant anchor in the shifting sea of images. I noticed a faint scent of pine and earth, as if I were standing in a forest at night. The scent was not coming from any physical source. It seemed to arise from the images themselves. At this point, a sudden wave of emotion rose within me. It was a mixture of grief and relief, of fear and acceptance. It came from deep inside, from a place I had not visited in many years. Tears began to form again, this time not from the earlier prayer round, but from a deeper place. I felt the tears as a physical release, as if something that had been held in my chest for a long time was finally being let go. The tears fell onto my cheeks, onto the blanket, and I did not try to stop them. The shaman's voice, low and soothing, continued to guide us, reminding us to breathe, to stay present, to trust the process. The drum beat grew louder in my perception, though it had not changed in volume. My ears seemed to amplify it, turning each thump into a pulse that resonated through my bones. I felt the rhythm in my fingertips, in my toes, in the very marrow of my arms. The feeling was both grounding and expansive. I could sense the presence of the grandfather, the spirit of the plant, as a warm, encompassing force that wrapped around me like a blanket. It was not a force of control, but of invitation. It asked me to look, to feel, to accept. As the night deepened, the candle flames began to flicker more rapidly, casting dancing shadows on the walls. The shadows seemed to move in time with the images in my mind, as if the walls themselves were reflecting the inner landscape. I could hear a faint humming from somewhere in the room, perhaps the low murmur of other participants, perhaps the sound of the plant itself. The humming blended with the drum, creating a layered soundscape that felt both intimate and vast. I noticed that my breathing had changed. It was no longer shallow. Each inhale felt like drawing in the entire room, each exhale like releasing a small piece of the night sky. My lungs felt full, my heart beat strong, and my mind was both quiet and alive. I could sense the shaman moving around the circle, his steps slow and deliberate, his hands occasionally touching the shoulders of participants, offering a gentle reminder that the plant was not a toy but a teacher, a living presence that demanded respect. The shaman's hand rested lightly on my shoulder, the weight of it grounding me as the drumbeat deepened. I feel the vibration travel through my spine, a low pulse that seems to synchronize with the beat of my heart. The room is dim, the fire at the altar flickering, casting amber light on the faces of the other participants. Their eyes are half closed, some fixed on the flames, others turned inward. The scent of sage and sweetgrass curls around us, mixing with the earthy aroma of the cactus that has been placed in the center of the circle. At this moment, the medicine begins to rise, not like a sudden wave, but like a slow tide that fills every cell. My breath becomes a bridge between the outside world and the interior landscape. Each inhale draws in the sound of the drum. Each exhale releases a small piece of my thoughts. I notice that the edges of my vision soften, the corners of the room blur, and the colors of the fire become more vivid, as if the flames are speaking in a language of hue and motion. The first peak arrives as a sudden expansion of awareness. I feel as though my body has dissolved into the air, becoming part of the rhythm that fills the space. The drum is no longer a distant sound. It is a pulse inside my chest, a heartbeat that matches the beating of the earth. I hear the shaman chant in a low tone, his voice resonating through the floorboards, through my bones. The chant is a series of syllables that do not have meaning in the ordinary sense, but they feel like a key turning in a lock inside me. Visions appear behind my closed eyes. I see a field of cactus needles, each one shimmering with a light that is both warm and cold. The needles stretch outward, forming a lattice that seems to hold the sky. Between the needles, I see tiny points of light moving like fireflies, each one pulsing in time with the drum. The field stretches into a horizon that is both near and far, and I feel a pull to walk through it. My legs feel weightless, as if I could step into the vision and walk among the needles without being pricked. As I move forward in this inner field, a feeling of deep grief rises. It is not a simple sadness. It is a heavy, dense emotion that sits in the pit of my stomach and spreads up through my chest. Tears begin to form at the corners of my eyes, and they fall freely, each drop feeling like a small river carving a path through stone. The tears are not just sorrow, they are also relief, as if a dam that has held back a river for years is finally breaking. The grief is attached to memories I have tried to ignore, moments of failure, moments of fear, moments of shame. The medicine brings them forward, not to punish me, but to allow me to see them clearly and let them go. While the tears flow, the sound of the guitars that have been playing softly in the background becomes a part of the experience. The strings vibrate in a way that feels like a hand on my back, supportive and steady. The chords rise and fall, matching the rise and fall of my breath. I feel the music entering my body, moving through my limbs, and settling in my heart. The combination of music, drum, chant, and my own breath creates a space where I feel both vulnerable and protected. In the middle of this wave of emotion, a new image forms. I see a large, ancient tree standing alone in a desert. Its roots are deep, its branches stretch wide, and its bark is covered in symbols that I cannot read but that feel familiar. The tree seems to pulse with a light that is neither bright nor dim, but just right. I feel an invitation to sit at the base of the tree, to place my hands on its trunk. When I do, a warmth spreads up my arms, into my shoulders, into my neck. The warmth feels like an acceptance, a knowing that I am exactly where I need to be. The shaman's voice returns, softer now, almost a whisper, as if he is speaking directly into my mind. He says, "Grandfather is with you, child. He sees you. He holds you." The words are simple, but they cut through the fog of my thoughts. I understand that the grief I am feeling is not a punishment, but a clearing. The tears are the water that will allow new growth. The tree is a symbol of that growth, rooted in the earth, reaching toward the sky. The peak begins to settle, and the intensity of the vision softens. The field of cactus needles recedes, the desert tree remains, but its outline becomes less sharp, more like a memory than a present scene. My breathing steadies, each breath now a gentle tide that rises and falls. The drum slows, its beat becoming a slow, steady thump that feels like a heartbeat of the earth itself. The music fades into a low hum that seems to come from everywhere and nowhere. Now I enter the plateau, a period where the medicine remains present, but the extreme highs have smoothed into a steady state. I feel a sense of spaciousness inside my head, as if a wall has been removed, and I can see the room beyond. The walls of the ceremony space appear to be made of light, their surfaces reflecting the fire, the faces, the shadows. I notice the details of the shaman's clothing, the patterns on his woven belt, the way his eyes are focused yet soft. I can feel his presence beside me, a steady anchor. During the plateau, I find myself listening to the stories of the other participants. Their voices are low, each one sharing a small piece of what the medicine has shown them. One woman speaks of a river that runs backward. Another man mentions a bird that sings in a language he does not understand. Their words are simple, but they carry weight. I feel a deep connection to each of them, as if we are all part of the same organism, breathing together, feeling together. The plateau also brings a clarity of thought that I have not felt in years. I notice that my mind is not cluttered with the usual chatter about work, about money, about obligations. Those thoughts are still there, but they sit at a distance, like clouds passing over a clear sky. I can observe them without being pulled into them. In this state, I realize that much of the stress I carry is based on expectations that I have placed on myself, expectations that are not aligned with my true needs. I see with a simple honesty that I have been trying to prove something to others, and that proof has been built on fear. The shaman moves again, his steps deliberate, and he offers a small cup of water infused with cactus juice. He passes it around, and I take a sip. The water is cool, slightly bitter, and it feels like it is washing away the remnants of the night's intensity. It grounds me, bringing my awareness back to the physical sensations of my body. I feel the floor beneath me, the weight of my legs, the pressure of the blanket on my skin. My fingers are slightly tingling, as if they have been charged with the energy of the ceremony. As the plateau continues, the drum slows further, eventually becoming a soft pulse that I can feel more than hear. The fire at the altar begins to die down, the flames turning to embers. The light they cast is now a soft orange glow, gentle on the faces of the participants. The room feels warm, safe, like a cocoon. I notice my heart beating in a rhythm that matches the remaining pulse of the drum. I feel a sense of gratitude rise within me, a quiet thankfulness for the space, for the shaman, for the plant, for the people who have shared this night with me. The come down begins when the shaman announces that the ceremony is drawing to a close. He speaks in a calm voice, reminding us to carry the lessons of the night with us as we return to the world outside. He asks us to place our hands on the altar, to feel the heat of the remaining embers, to take one last breath together. I follow his instruction, my hands resting on the stone surface, feeling its coolness under the lingering warmth of the fire. As the final breath is taken, I feel a gentle release, as if a knot that has been tied in my chest for years is loosening. The tears have dried, but the feeling of openness remains. My eyes are open now, and I see the faces of the participants clearly. They are smiling, some with tears still glistening, others with a serene expression. The shaman looks at me and nods, his eyes reflecting a deep understanding. He does not need to say anything. The gesture is enough. When the drum finally stops, the room is quiet except for the soft crackle of the dying fire. The participants begin to rise slowly, stretching their limbs as if waking from a deep sleep. I stand, feeling my muscles a little stiff, my joints a little heavy, but my mind clear. I walk to the doorway and step outside into the cool night air. The sky is clear, stars scattered across the darkness like tiny points of light. The air is crisp, carrying the scent of desert sage and distant pine. I take a deep breath, feeling the night air fill my lungs, and I notice that the breath feels different now, more intentional, more alive. The after effects of the medicine linger throughout the night. My body feels light, as if a weight has been lifted. My thoughts are still quiet, but they are not empty. They are spacious, allowing new ideas to settle without pressure. I notice a subtle warmth in my chest that remains, a reminder of the love that was felt during the ceremony. I feel a desire to move, to stretch, to walk, to be present in my own body. I also feel an urge to write, to put the experience into words, even though I know that words will never fully capture what happened. In the hours after the ceremony, I sit on the porch of the lodge, a blanket wrapped around my shoulders. The night is deep, the stars bright. I think about the grief that came up, the tears, the tree, the cactus field. I realize that the grief was not just about past mistakes, but about a part of myself that I have kept hidden for too long. By allowing the tears to flow, I have given that part a chance to be seen, to be accepted. The tree stands as a symbol of the new growth that will come from this acceptance. I feel a sense of responsibility now, a need to nurture this growth, to tend to it like a gardener would tend a plant. The next morning I wake early, before the sun has fully risen. I sit on the floor of my room, legs crossed, back straight as the shaman taught us. I close my eyes and breathe. The memory of the night is still vivid, but it is not overwhelming. I can recall the drum, the chant, the music, the tears, the tree, the feeling of being held by something larger than myself. I notice that my body feels rested, despite the lack of sleep. My muscles are not sore, my head is clearer. I feel a quiet confidence, a belief that I can face the day with a new perspective. Integration comes slowly over the next few days. I find myself noticing patterns that I previously ignored. When I speak with a friend, I listen more deeply, aware of the tone of their voice, the weight of their words. When I sit at my desk, I notice the urge to rush, and I pause, breathing as I have learned to do. I find that the fear that once kept me from expressing my true feelings has lessened. I am more willing to say what is in my heart, even if it feels vulnerable. The sense of connection I felt with the other participants remains. I have kept in touch with a few of them, sharing brief messages of gratitude and support. I also notice that the physical sensations from the ceremony have settled into a subtle background hum. Occasionally, when I am stressed, I feel a faint pulse in my chest that reminds me of the drum, and I can use that memory to ground myself. The taste of the cactus, bitter and earthy, sometimes comes back in a dream, reminding me of the lesson that the plant is not a toy but a teacher.